Jessica stood frozen at the door of the hotel room, her heart pounding so loudly she thought it would burst through her chest. Her hands shook as she pushed the door open wider, and what she saw nearly made her scream. There he was, her husband of 7 years, Kenneth, half naked, standing in front of a woman Jessica had never seen before. The woman wore nothing but one of Kenneth's dress shirts, unbuttoned halfway down. The bed behind them was messy, the kind of mess that didn't come from sleeping. It was a mess that told a story Jessica never imagined would be hers. Kenneth's eyes widened when he saw her, but before he could speak, Jessica reached into her handbag and threw something at him. It hit the wall just beside his head. The mistress screamed and ran to hide behind Kenneth. Jessica didn't cry. She didn't beg. She didn't shout. Instead, she smiled. And that was when Kenneth should have been scared, because that smile wasn't normal. That smile meant something else entirely. "Don't worry," she said, voice calm. "I'm not here to fight. But, Kenneth, I hope you can sleep well tonight, because from this moment, your peace is over." What Jessica did next would shock not just Kenneth, but everyone who ever thought they knew who she was. Now, let me tell you how we got here. Jessica and Kenneth lived in a busy part of Port Harcourt, a city filled with noise, movement, and life. They were known in their neighborhood as the perfect couple. People would say things like, "Ah, God, whenever they saw them walk by, holding hands and laughing. Jessica worked as a secondary school teacher, while Kenneth was a civil engineer. They met during NYSC in Ibadan and moved to Port Harcourt after they got married. Their home was cozy, not big, not small, but full of love, or so Jessica thought. Every morning, Jessica woke up early to pack Kenneth's lunch. He always kissed her forehead before leaving. She believed they were happy, even though he had been acting different for some time. He started coming home late, claiming it was site work. He stopped asking about her day, and even their Saturday morning gist in the kitchen slowly faded. Still, Jessica kept holding on. She believed marriages went through phases. She thought if she just tried harder, cooked his favorite meals, wore her nicest dresses, prayed harder, things would go back to normal. But one day, she found something strange. A pink earring inside Kenneth's car. It wasn't hers. She confronted him, but he laughed it off. "Babe, you know how all these sight girls are now. Maybe one of them entered my car by mistake," he said with a smirk. Jessica didn't argue. She just smiled and nodded. But inside, something cracked. She decided to do something she never thought she would. Spy on her husband. It started with small things. She checked his call logs when he was in the bathroom. She followed his car once when he told her he was going to Alim for work. But that day, his car didn't go near any construction site. Instead, it stopped at a hotel. A small but expensive place called Eden's Garden. Jessica stayed in her car and watched as Kenneth stepped out. With a woman. The woman was younger, lighter-skinned, with long red braids that bounced as she walked. Jessica sat there for almost an hour, heart beating fast, waiting, hoping it was all innocent. But when they didn't come out after an hour and a half, she knew the truth. Still, she didn't confront him. Not yet. She went home, cooked his dinner, and smiled when he returned with his usual lie. "Traffic was crazy," he said, kissing her cheek. Jessica looked into his eyes and said, "Welcome home, baby." But that night, she didn't sleep. She lay beside him in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking. That was when she made the decision. She wouldn't leave. She wouldn't scream. She wouldn't fight the other woman. Instead, she would make him regret ever thinking she was the fool. She began gathering her own evidence. Screenshots, pictures, voice recordings. She opened a fake Instagram account and befriended the mistress, pretending to be a university girl named Tina, who was looking for sugar daddies. The mistress, whose name was Linda, became too comfortable and started telling Tina everything. One day, Linda even sent a picture of herself in Jessica's house. The same house Jessica decorated with her sweat. The same couch she and Kenneth once cuddled on, now used for lies and betrayal. Jessica didn't cry. Instead, she got to work. She planned every step, every moment, every word. She decided the perfect day would be Kenneth's birthday. He had already told her he had meetings and wouldn't be around. But Linda had told Tina the truth. Kenneth was taking her to a hotel. Jessica got the room number from a hotel worker she paid off. She wore her best dress. Not too fancy, just enough to blend in. She walked into Eden's garden with confidence, holding her phone tightly, already recording everything. And that was how she caught them. Just like that. But that was only the beginning. The revenge was coming. And it wasn't what anyone expected. Now let me take you back a little. Back to the moment when the cracks first began to show. It was 3 months before Kenneth's birthday. Jessica had noticed how Kenneth had changed. But she blamed it on stress. She wanted to surprise him, so she planned a romantic dinner at home, cooked all his favorite dishes, pounded yam and vegetable soup, grilled chicken, and even his favorite Chapman. She lit candles, wore a red silk dress, and waited. Kenneth didn't come home till 11:45 p.m. When he finally arrived, he looked tired and irritated. "What's all this?" he asked, looking around the living room. Jessica smiled. "Just wanted to make tonight special." "I'm not hungry," he said and walked past her. Jessica stood there for a long time. The candles burned low. Her heart sank. The next morning, he didn't apologize. He acted like nothing happened. She called her best friend, Ada. "You're doing too much, Jess," Ada said. "If he wants to cheat, he will cheat. Just take care of yourself and be wise." Jessica was quiet. She knew Ada meant well, but she wasn't ready to give up yet. Not on her marriage. Not on 7 years. But after that night, Jessica started watching more closely. Kenneth changed his phone password. He started locking the bathroom door when he showered. He started hiding his laundry. Small things, but they spoke loudly. Jessica kept her cool. She didn't confront. She didn't accuse. She just watched. Then came the day she found a hotel keycard in his trouser pocket. It wasn't even hidden well. That was the insult. He had become that careless. That day, something changed inside her. She booked an appointment with a therapist just to talk. Not because she was losing her mind, but because she needed to hold on to it. And the therapist asked her one question that stuck with her. "What would justice look like to you, Jessica?" She didn't have the answer then. But 3 days later, when Kenneth kissed her goodbye and told her he was going for a 2-day project out of town, she followed him again. He wasn't going out of town. He was meeting Linda. And as she watched them from across the street, holding hands like lovers in a Nollywood movie, Jessica finally found her answer. Justice wasn't shouting. Justice wasn't tears. Justice was planning something so quiet, so shocking, so smart. It would leave Kenneth broken. And now she was ready. The day of Kenneth's birthday arrived. He left the house early. He had told Jessica not to bother with any party because of work. Jessica smiled and kissed him goodbye. Then she got dressed. It was time. She entered the hotel at exactly 3:15 p.m. The room number was 308. The door was unlocked. She pushed it open and caught them just like that. But instead of yelling, she pulled out her phone, aimed it at both of them and said, "Smile for the camera." Kenneth stood still, like a deer in headlights. Linda gasped, trying to cover herself. Jessica laughed. Loud, clear, and terrifying. Then she dropped the phone on the table, still recording, and said, "I'm just getting started." But what she did next was something no one could have predicted. Jessica didn't blink. She walked slowly around the room like a cat circling its prey. Kenneth reached for his trousers, mumbling something that sounded like, "Jess, I can explain." "Don't," Jessica cut in, her voice sharp like broken glass. "You'll only embarrass yourself." Linda was already crying. The white bedsheet wrapped awkwardly around her like a fallen angel caught in sin. She looked younger up close, with her fake lashes half off and her cheap perfume choking the air. Jessica glanced at her once and then never looked her way again. This moment wasn't about her. This was about Kenneth. "Are you proud of yourself?" Jessica asked, picking up the champagne bottle they had been drinking from. She turned it in her hands. "So this is what site work looks like now, ABI? Naked and dripping in betrayal." "Jess," I said, "don't talk." The silence that followed was louder than any scream. Jessica walked over to the table, where Kenneth had laid out a small birthday cake with "Happy Birthday, Baby" written in red icing. She smiled and pulled out her phone again. Her fingers tapped quickly, and in a matter of seconds, she sent the recorded video to herself, and then to 3 people: Ada, Kenneth's boss, and Kenneth's mother. "Oh, don't worry," she said, noticing his horrified expression. "That's not all. You'll be famous by evening. You should have told me you wanted a birthday surprise. I'm giving you one." "You're crazy," Kenneth snapped, finally losing control. "You want to destroy me?" Jessica turned to him, her eyes calm. "I'm not crazy. I'm calculated. And I'm not destroying you. You did that all by yourself." Then, without another word, she walked out of the hotel room, heels clicking confidently like thunderclaps behind her. But her mind was spinning. The calm was an act. Inside, Jessica was shaking. She sat in her car for a full 10 minutes, breathing slowly. Her heart was racing, her palms sweaty. But she had done it. The first part of her plan was complete. And the second part? That one was going to sting. She started her car and drove straight to Ada's house. As soon as Ada opened the door, Jessica burst into tears. "Oh my God! You actually did it?" Ada whispered, pulling her in. "You really caught him." Jessica nodded through the sobs. "I saw them. I saw everything." Ada gave her a glass of water and let her cry it out. After 30 minutes, Jessica wiped her eyes and stood up. "That's enough," she said. "Now I move to phase 2. Ada's eyes widened. "Phase 2? Jess, what else do you want to do?" Jessica looked her dead in the eye. "I'm going to destroy his life from the inside." And she meant it. That evening, chaos erupted. Kenneth's mother called him first, screaming in Yoruba so loud it could be heard through the phone. She loved Jessica deeply and had warned Kenneth before, "Don't play with that woman. She's gold." His boss wasn't so kind. He called Kenneth into the office the next morning and played the video in full, pausing halfway to say, "So this is how you spend company time, Kenneth?" Kenneth was suspended immediately. Not fired yet, but it was coming. Jessica had found out he had been using work funds to impress Linda. She had already sent the evidence to the company's audit department. But that wasn't even the worst part. Jessica had created a fake wedding invitation, complete with Kenneth and Linda's names. Then she sent it to every one of Kenneth's WhatsApp contacts using a burner number, with a note that read, "Guess who's tying the knot in secret?" By noon, Kenneth's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Calls, texts, disappointment, confusion. People were asking questions he had no answers for. Meanwhile, Jessica played innocent. She stayed quiet on social media. She still went to work, still greeted the neighbors, still smiled. But inside, she was watching everything burn. Kenneth finally came home 3 days later, looking like a ghost. His eyes were red, his shirt rumpled, his beard unshaved. Jessica was in the kitchen, slicing onions. He stood at the doorway, unsure whether to speak or kneel. "Jessica," he started. She turned around slowly. "Yes, I messed up." She blinked at him. "You think I don't even know what to say." "You don't need to say anything, Kenneth. You need to listen." He nodded. Jessica wiped her hands on a napkin and walked into the living room. She picked up a document from the center table. "These are divorce papers," she said, holding them up. "I haven't signed yet." Kenneth's eyes widened. No, please, Jess. I swear, it meant nothing." Jessica raised a brow. "Nothing? You lost your job over nothing? You brought another woman into our house for nothing? You insulted 7 years of loyalty for nothing?" Kenneth dropped to his knees. Please don't leave me." Jessica didn't move. "I'm not leaving you." His head shot up in surprise. "I'm going to stay," she continued. "But not for love. No, I'm going to stay because you need to feel what betrayal tastes like. I want you to wake up every day beside me and remember what you lost. No peace, no affection, no forgiveness, just silence." Kenneth's mouth opened, but no words came out. Jessica dropped the papers on the table and walked upstairs. That night, she locked the bedroom door. He slept on the couch, and she slept peacefully for the first time in months. But fate was not done with them yet. The next morning, Jessica went to work as usual. Her students greeted her cheerfully, and she smiled. During her lunch break, her phone rang. It was a strange number. She picked. A soft voice said, "Hello. Is this Mrs. Jessica Williams?" "Yes, speaking. This is Mrs. Helen from the Lagos University Teaching Hospital. I believe you know a Miss Linda Okeke." Jessica's stomach tightened. "Yes, I do. She listed you as an emergency contact. She was just rushed in after collapsing at a shopping mall." Jessica was silent. "She's currently unconscious and pregnant." Jessica froze. "Pregnant? Sorry? Did you say pregnant?" "Yes, ma'am. About 2 months in." Jessica's breath caught in her throat. She ended the call without replying. For a moment, she sat still, unable to move. Her revenge had begun like a fire, but this was gasoline. Linda was pregnant, with Kenneth's child, a child that could change everything. The students rang the closing bell in the background, but Jessica didn't hear it. All she could hear was her heart pounding and one question echoing in her mind. What do I do now? Jessica stood in the middle of the school staff room, her phone still in her hand, her mind spinning like a washing machine stuck on the fastest cycle. Pregnant? Linda was pregnant? No, 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 no. She sat down slowly, her hands shaking. Her chest felt tight, like something was squeezing her from the inside. For a few minutes, she couldn't even think straight. The air around her seemed thinner, harder to breathe. The voice of the nurse played again in her head like a tape on repeat. She's unconscious and pregnant. Jessica didn't know how she got to her car, but before she realized what she was doing, she was driving. Not to the hospital. No, she needed to think first. She couldn't walk into that place without knowing what her next move was. So she drove, and drove, until she reached a quiet spot near a waterfront in the GRA area of Port Harcourt, a place she and Kenneth used to go in their early days of dating. They'd sit on the bonnet of the car, drink suya and malt, and talk about the future. Now she sat alone in the same spot, staring at the river. Pregnant. The word hit her like a slap again. Jessica had always wanted children. She and Kenneth had been trying for 4 years. They even saw doctors, ran tests, but nothing had happened. The doctors said there was nothing wrong with either of them. They called it unexplained infertility. She cried herself to sleep some nights, wondering why her womb stayed empty. Kenneth used to comfort her, he used to pray with her. But now, the same man had gotten his side chick pregnant. In 2 months. 2. Jessica screamed into the silence, her voice raw with pain. Then she did something unexpected. She laughed. Not from joy, but from disbelief. From deep, bitter betrayal. It was like life had reached into her chest, pulled out her heart, and laughed in her face. She stayed there for almost an hour before she finally picked up her phone and called Ada. The line rang once. "Jessica," Ada answered quickly. "Where are you? You didn't go home." Jessica's voice was cold. "Linda is pregnant." There was silence on the line. Then Ada whispered, "Jesus." She collapsed. "They called me. I don't even know why she listed me as her emergency contact. Maybe to mock me, maybe to test me. I don't know. Are you okay?" Jessica didn't answer. Ada sighed. "Come to my place. Let's talk." Jessica did. The moment she entered Ada's house, she broke again. "I gave this man my youth, Ada. 7 years. 7 whole years. I prayed with him, fasted with him. And now some red-haired homewrecker walks in and gets what I've been begging God for in just 2 months." Ada hugged her tightly. "It's not fair. It's wicked. But Jessica, please, you need to be smart now." Jessica sat up. "I've been smart. Every step I took was calculated. But I didn't see this coming. So what are you going to do?" Jessica wiped her eyes and stood. "I need to go to the hospital." "Wait, what? You're going to see Linda?" "Yes." "Jessica, why?" Jessica took a deep breath. "Because sometimes Revenge wears a nurse's smile. When Jessica got to Lagos University Teaching Hospital, it was already past 8 p.m. She gave her name at the reception and was directed to the private wing where Linda was being treated. She found her in room 14. Jessica knocked once, then opened the door. Linda was awake now, lying on the hospital bed, and 4 drip attached to her arm. Her face turned pale when she saw who walked in. "You?" she whispered. Jessica didn't blink. She walked in, calm and cold. She took the seat beside Linda's bed and crossed her legs. "Relax. I didn't come to slap you," Jessica said softly. Linda swallowed hard. What do you want?" Jessica looked around the room. "Nice hospital. Expensive. I wonder who's paying for all this." Linda looked away. "You're pregnant," Jessica said, as if she was reading a newspaper. Linda nodded slowly. "Yes. Is it Kenneth's?" Tears welled up in Linda's eyes. "Yes. I didn't plan this." Jessica chuckled darkly. "Of course you didn't. Nothing in this world ever happens with planning, right?" Linda wiped her eyes. I was going to tell him, but then I fainted. I didn't know who else to list. Panicked. You were the only name that came to my head." Jessica leaned forward, her voice lower now. "I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to think very hard before you answer." Linda looked at her. "Do you want to keep this baby?" Linda hesitated. I don't know." Jessica nodded. "Well, let me tell you something you should know. Kenneth will never marry you. You're not his future. You're not even his present. You were just a playground. A dirty secret." Tears streamed down Linda's face. "I'm not saying this to hurt you," Jessica said, her tone strangely kind. "I'm saying it so you understand what's coming. You're going to be left alone with a child. The same man who ruined his own home will deny yours. And you'll realize too late that being a mistress has no happy ending." Linda turned her face away, weeping quietly. Jessica stood and reached into her bag. She brought out an envelope and dropped it on the bedside table. "There's some money in there. Take care of yourself." Linda's eyes widened. "Why are you doing this?" Jessica looked at her, her eyes sharp as a knife. "Because I want you to live long enough to regret every moment you thought you were winning." Then she turned and walked out. She didn't look back. That night, when Jessica returned home, Kenneth was sitting in the dark, waiting for her. The power was out, and only a small rechargeable lamp lit the room. He looked at her like a man already buried. "You went to see her," he said quietly. Jessica dropped her bag on the table. "I did. She told me," he said. Jessica sat on the couch opposite him. There was a long silence. "Is it true?" she asked finally. Kenneth nodded slowly. "Yes, she's pregnant." Jessica nodded. "So now what?" "I don't know," he whispered. Jessica stood and walked over to the window. "You know what's funny? I used to pray to God every day to give us a child. I begged. I fasted. I cried. And all this while, you were planting seeds elsewhere." Kenneth stood, his voice trembling. "I didn't mean to hurt you. But you did. Over and over. I swear it was a mistake." Jessica turned sharply. "Stop calling it a mistake. You don't fall into another woman's bed by mistake. You walk there, with full chest." Kenneth was quiet. Jessica continued. "You lost your job. You lost my respect. And now you're about to be a father outside our home. So tell me, Kenneth, what else do you have left to lose?" His hands trembled. Jessica looked him in the eye. "Sleep well, because tomorrow your life changes forever." Then she walked upstairs, and this time, she didn't lock the door. But Kenneth didn't follow her. He sat back down in the darkness, shaking. He didn't know what Jessica meant, but something told him the worst was still coming. Kenneth couldn't sleep. He stayed on the couch all night, sitting in the same spot like a statue cursed by his own guilt. Sweat soaked his shirt, even though the air was cool. He kept hearing Jessica's voice again and again in his head. "Tomorrow, your life changes forever." What did she mean? What else could she possibly do? He had already lost his job, his dignity, and his peace. His mother wasn't speaking to him. His friends were avoiding him. Even his church had called to ask why his marriage was trending online. It was like watching a flood destroy everything you built with your own hands. But Jessica, she didn't act like a woman who was broken. No, she was calm. Too calm. And that scared him. By the time the first cock crowed, Kenneth knew he had to prepare for whatever was coming. But nothing could have prepared him for what Jessica did next. At exactly 7:45 a.m., Jessica stepped out of their bedroom, dressed smartly in a royal blue blouse and black trousers. Her hair was packed neatly in a bun, and she wore nude heels that clicked sharply on the tiled floor. Kenneth stood when he saw her. "Jessica, please. Before anything happens today, I just want to talk." Jessica glanced at him. "We'll talk. After." She picked up her bag and walked past him. "After what?" he asked. Jessica turned and smiled faintly. "After the world knows the full truth." Then she left the house. Kenneth stood there, confused. He paced the floor for a while, then sat back down, staring at the wall. Just before 9 a.m., his phone buzzed. A message had come in from an unknown number. He opened it and nearly dropped the phone. It was a flyer, an actual event flyer, bold and bright, with his face, and Linda's. At the top it read, "Exclusive premiere, The Mistress, The Husband and the Wife, A True Story, hosted by Jessica Williams." Below that were words in smaller print. "Join us live on Facebook and Instagram this Sunday by 6 p.m. as Jessica Williams tells the world the truth behind the betrayal that shook her marriage. Real footage, real names, real consequences." Kenneth's blood ran cold. He started dialing Jessica's number with shaking fingers. She didn't pick. He called Ada. No answer. He called Jessica again. Still nothing. Then he checked Facebook. Jessica had just gone live. Panic hit him like a hammer. He clicked on the video, and what he saw nearly made him scream. Jessica sat behind a desk in a quiet, well-lit room, looking composed and professional. The camera was steady, and her voice calm. "Hello, everyone. My name is Jessica Williams. And today, I want to share a story. Not to shame anyone, but to show you how silence can be deadly, and how women suffer in silence until they choose to take their power back." Kenneth couldn't breathe. There were already 3,000 people watching, and the numbers kept going up. Jessica continued, "For 7 years, I was married to a man I loved. I gave him my best. I stood by him through job loss, family problems, and childlessness. I prayed with him, cried with him, but he betrayed me in the worst way with another woman. In our home, on our bed." She paused, took a deep breath. "I found out, and I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I planned." Then she did the unthinkable. She played the video, the one she had recorded at the hotel, uncut and censored. The footage showed Kenneth standing in the room, half-dressed, Linda behind him, both looking shocked as Jessica entered. The audio was clear. His voice was heard. Linda's voice was heard. People in the live chat were already losing their minds. Jesus! This man finished his life. This is not a story. It's a war. Sis went full Nollywood. But make it real. I hope the side chick is watching this." Jessica continued, now with tears in her eyes. "I waited for years to be called Mummy, but this man gave that title to a stranger. And I refuse to suffer in silence anymore." Then she ended the live video with a final line. "Betrayal doesn't just hurt. It teaches. And I've learned that silence is not always strength. Sometimes it's a prison. And I'm breaking out." As soon as the live ended, Kenneth's phone exploded. Calls, texts, his pastor, his boss, his uncle in Abuja, everyone. Even Linda's number popped up on his screen. He couldn't answer anyone. He collapsed into the chair and held his head. What had she done? She had gone public. With everything. He tried to stand, but his legs were weak. Then the door opened. Jessica walked in, calm as always. "You saw it?" she asked. Kenneth nodded slowly. You posted it everywhere?" "No," she replied. "I streamed it. People recorded it. It's out there now. WhatsApp. Twitter, YouTube. It's in God's hands. Kenneth rubbed his face. Why would you do this to me? Jessica stepped closer. Because you did it to me first. Then she dropped a brown envelope on the table. What's that? He asked. Legal documents, she said. I'm selling this house. What? This is our home. No, Kenneth. It was our home. But you brought another woman into it. So now it's just a memory. And I don't live in memories. I move forward. Kenneth's voice shook. You want to make me homeless? Jessica smiled sadly. No. I want you to learn what it feels like to lose the one place you called safe. Then she turned to walk away. But just as she reached the stairs, he said something that stopped her in her tracks. Jessica, I'm sorry. She paused, then turned around slowly. That's not enough anymore, she said. And soon, even you will realize that sorry doesn't fix broken glass. It just cuts deeper. She walked up the stairs and closed the bedroom door. Kenneth collapsed on the floor. He wept. For the first time in years, he cried like a baby. Because now, he was beginning to understand what Jessica meant by losing everything. But still, something else was coming. Something bigger. Because that evening, Jessica received a message on her phone that would flip the entire story on its head. It read, Hello. You don't know me, but I'm not the only woman your husband has been with. Jessica stared at the message like it was a lie wearing the skin of truth. Hello. You don't know me, but I'm not the only woman your husband has been with. She blinked, read it again, and read it a third time just to be sure her eyes weren't playing tricks. The message came from a number she didn't recognize. No profile picture. No name. Just cold, sharp words that felt like acid sliding down her throat. She was sitting on her bed, just a few hours after dropping the final bombshell on social media. Her entire phone had been vibrating nonstop. Friends, followers, even strangers were praising her bravery. Some were even calling her a national hero. But this message right here, it wasn't praise. It was war. She quickly typed a reply. Who are you? A typing bubble appeared, then stopped, then started again. Then the reply came. Let's just say I've been where you've been. But my story didn't end like yours. Jessica sat upright. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Are you saying you were also involved with Kenneth? Another pause. Then the next message arrived. Not me. My sister. And it didn't end well. Can we meet? Jessica's heart skipped. She didn't reply immediately. Instead, she stood up and walked to the window, staring out into the street below. Her thoughts scattered like feathers in a windstorm. She had already started taking back control of her life. She had exposed him, humiliated him. She thought she knew everything. But now, this? What else could Kenneth be hiding? Who else had suffered because of him? After a long moment, she returned to the bed and replied, Where and when? The answer came instantly. Tomorrow, 4 p.m. Sweet Savory Cafe, off ABA Road. Jessica hesitated, then typed, I'll be there. The next day came quickly. She dressed down. A simple blouse, jeans, no makeup, just confidence and curiosity. As she approached the cafe, her eyes scanned the crowd. It was a small but busy spot, known for its pastries and quiet corners, perfect for private conversations. Then she saw her, a woman sitting by the window, wearing a black turtleneck and dark glasses. She was in her late 20s, slim, and held a calm posture. Her phone was on the table in front of her, next to a glass of orange juice. Jessica walked in slowly and approached her. You must be the one who texted me, she said. The woman stood and removed her glasses. I'm Rachel, she said. Thank you for coming. They shook hands and sat down. Jessica didn't waste time. You said your sister was also involved with Kenneth? Rachel nodded, her expression tight. Yes, her name was Miriam. Was? Jessica caught that instantly. Wait, why are you speaking in past tense? Rachel looked up. Her eyes filled with something Jessica hadn't seen in a while, grief. Miriam is dead. Jessica's breath caught. Dead. Rachel nodded. Yes, And your husband was the reason. Silence fell over the table like a thundercloud. Jessica leaned back. You need to explain. Rachel took a deep breath. Miriam met Kenneth over a year ago. He told her he was divorced. Lied. Told her he was trying to rebuild his life. He made her feel like she was saving him. You know the way men can talk when they want something. Jessica said nothing. Rachel continued. She fell for him. Hard. She started giving him money, buying things for him, even paid part of the rent on an apartment he claimed was temporary housing while his house was under renovation. Jessica blinked. She had never heard of that apartment. Rachel's voice grew tight. Then she got pregnant. Jessica felt something sink inside her. He begged her to abort it. Said the timing wasn't right. She refused. She wanted to keep the baby. But he ghosted her. Blocked her. Disappeared. Jessica's hand trembled slightly. She reached for the glass of water in front of her. Rachel's eyes began to water. Miriam fell into depression. She started bleeding one day and lost the baby. After that, she just stopped living. One night, she took a bottle of sleeping pills. Left a note. Jessica whispered. What did it say? Rachel's voice cracked. He said he loved me, but he disappeared when I needed him. I don't want to live in a world where people like Kenneth breathe freely. Jessica closed her eyes. A cold wave washed over her. Kenneth caused this? Rachel reached into her bag and pulled out a photo. She slid it across the table. It was Miriam. Young. Beautiful. Bright smile. Gone. Jessica swallowed hard. Why are you telling me this now? Rachel looked at her fiercely. Because I saw your video yesterday, and I realized something. You're not just his wife. You're the only one strong enough to stop him. For good. Jessica stared at her. What do you want me to do? Rachel leaned in. Expose him. Not just online. Take it further. Legally. Publicly. Make sure he never does this to another woman again. Jessica nodded slowly. She could feel something building inside her. Something stronger than anger. Something called purpose. I will, she said. Rachel smiled. Good. Because you're not just fighting for yourself anymore. You're fighting for all of us. When Jessica got home that evening, Kenneth was in the kitchen, washing the few dishes that were left in the sink. He looked up as she entered but didn't speak. Jessica dropped her bag on the dining table and walked up to him. I spoke to someone today, she said. Kenneth looked confused. Who? Miriam's sister. His entire body froze. Jessica saw it. How many more, Kenneth? She asked quietly. How many lives did you damage while pretending to be the victim in your own marriage? Kenneth dropped the plate he was washing. It shattered in the sink. He turned slowly. That was a long time ago. Jessica's voice rose slightly. A woman is dead, Kenneth. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Jessica stepped closer. You didn't just cheat on me. You destroyed lives. You used your charm to manipulate women, then abandoned them when things got hard. I didn't mean. Shut up, Jessica snapped. This isn't about what you meant. It's about what you did. Kenneth backed away, his face pale. Jessica pulled out her phone and held it up. By tomorrow, I'll be submitting a full case to your former company. Fraud. Misuse of funds. I've got all the receipts. Kenneth staggered. You'll get me arrested? Jessica's eyes locked with his. If that's what justice looks like, then yes. Then she walked past him. And just as she reached the stairs, another message came in on her phone. She paused to read it. It was from an anonymous email address. Subject: Jessica, you don't know the full story. He's hiding something worse. Her heart dropped. She opened the email, and what she saw inside made her knees go weak. Attached was a scanned marriage certificate, with Kenneth's name, and another woman's name, from 3 years ago. Jessica whispered to herself in shock. He married someone else. While we were still married? Jessica couldn't move. She stood at the foot of the stairs, staring at her phone like it was cursed. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through the attachment again. There it was, a marriage certificate. Kenneth Williams. And another woman, Melanie Duke. dated 3 years ago. Her eyes scanned the location. A registry office in Abuja. Official seal. Signature. Witnesses. This wasn't fake. Jessica felt her knees weaken. Her chest rose and fell like she'd just run a marathon uphill. Everything she thought she knew, every memory, every kiss, every apology, was now a filthy lie. He didn't just cheat. He didn't just get someone else pregnant. He married another woman, while still married to her. Bigamy. Criminal offense. Suddenly, her phone slipped from her hand and hit the floor with a thud. Kenneth, still in the kitchen, rushed toward her. What happened? Jessica looked up at him, slowly, like a lioness sizing up her prey. She bent, picked up the phone, tapped a few times, and then turned the screen to his face. Kenneth's eyes widened. His lips parted. Silence. Dead, guilty silence. Jessica's voice was a whisper, but it was full of fire. What is this? Kenneth staggered back. I can explain. Jessica's voice cracked with rage. You married someone else? While still married to me. What are you? Jessica, please. No. Talk. Tell me the truth. The whole truth. Kenneth sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. I didn't mean for it to happen like that. Jessica paced the room like she was trying to hold back from exploding. You married her, Kenneth. This isn't just betrayal. It's a crime. Kenneth lifted his head slowly. Melanie was. She was someone I knew before I met you. Jessica narrowed her eyes. And we reconnected when I was working on a project in Abuja. It was supposed to be nothing. Just talk. Just talk that led to marriage? Kenneth winced. She got pregnant. And her family, very wealthy, very connected, they forced my hand. They told me if I didn't marry her, they'd ruin my career. So I did. But it wasn't real. It was just to protect myself. I came back to you. I stayed with you. Jessica's voice was cold. And what happened to her? Kenneth's voice dropped. She lost the baby and left the country. Jessica stared at him, completely disgusted. So you've made a habit of destroying women, haven't you? I didn't. Save it, she roared, her voice shaking with fury. Kenneth was silent. Jessica marched to the shelf, pulled out her legal documents, and began flipping through them. What are you doing? Kenneth asked. Checking something. She found what she was looking for, their original marriage certificate. She stared at it like it was a dead body, then turned back to him. Your second marriage is invalid. But now our marriage can get you locked up. For bigamy. Do you know how many years you can spend in prison for this? Kenneth's voice trembled. Jessica, please, don't do this. But she wasn't listening anymore. She was flipping through her phone, calling someone. Hello, Barrister Uche? Yes, it's Jessica Williams. I need a full legal consultation. No, immediately. I have documents to share with you. Yes, it's about marriage fraud. Kenneth jumped up. Jessica, please don't do this. Let's talk like husband and wife. Jessica lowered her phone slowly. We stopped being husband and wife the day you stood in front of another woman and said, I do. Kenneth broke down. I'll lose everything. You already did. She walked out of the living room and slammed the door behind her. That night, Jessica couldn't sleep. She lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. This wasn't just a broken marriage. This was war. She opened her phone again and pulled up the email. There was no name, no clue who sent it. Just one line at the end. Melanie is back in Nigeria. She wants answers too. Jessica's heart thumped. So it wasn't over. She quickly responded to the email. Where is she? No reply. She waited. 15 minutes. Nothing. But then, just as she was about to give up, a new message arrived. She'll contact you soon. Be ready. She doesn't want revenge. She wants justice. Jessica sat up. This was bigger than her. Bigger than social media. Bigger than public shame. This was legal now. And she was ready. The next morning, her lawyer, Barrister Uche, came to the house. He wore a navy blue suit and thick glasses, his face lined with wisdom. He reviewed every document, Jessica and Kenneth's marriage certificate, the secret one with Melanie, and even screenshots of the online drama. "This is very serious," he said. "I know," Jessica replied. He looked at her carefully. "Are you ready to press charges?" Jessica was silent for a moment. Then she nodded. "Yes, I'm ready." Kenneth had been hiding in the guest room all morning, but when he heard the lawyer's voice, he walked in slowly. "Barrister," he greeted with forced politeness. The lawyer didn't smile. "Mr. Williams, you found yourself in a deep hole." Kenneth looked at Jessica, eyes pleading. "Jess, please, can we fix this? Can we just start again?" Jessica looked him in the eye. "There's no again, Kenneth. You buried that option 3 years ago." Kenneth dropped to his knees. "I'm begging you." Barrister Uche cleared his throat. "Stand up, Mr. Williams. You'll need that strength. You may be facing criminal charges, fraud, bigamy, emotional abuse. If her second husband comes forward, this could go international." Kenneth looked confused. "Her second husband?" Jessica turned sharply. "What?" The lawyer blinked. "Melanie. She got remarried abroad. If she registered that marriage and you were still legally her husband, she could also be in trouble, or worse, she might use this to drag you through an international court." Jessica stood there, stunned. So Kenneth wasn't just a villain. He was a time bomb ticking across borders. But before anyone could say anything else, there was a knock at the door. Jessica walked over and opened it. There stood a woman, tall, elegant, wearing a fitted wine-colored dress and dark glasses. She removed them slowly. "Jessica Williams?" she asked. Jessica nodded. "I'm Melanie Duke." Her voice was calm, but her eyes were full of fire. And just behind her, 2 men in plain clothes stepped forward. One of them pulled out a badge. "Good afternoon, Ma. We're from the Federal Criminal Investigation Department. We need to speak to Mr. Kenneth Williams." Jessica stepped aside slowly. "Please," she said, "be my guest." The officers entered, and Kenneth was finally cornered. Kenneth's eyes darted from the 2 plainclothes officers to Melanie, then to Jessica, who stood still by the door like a judge watching her verdict come to life. The lead officer stepped forward and flashed his ID once again. "Mr. Kenneth Williams, you're needed at our station for questioning concerning a matter involving marriage fraud, bigamy, and financial deceit." Kenneth stammered, his lips quivering. "Oh, officer, please. This is a misunderstanding. I can explain." "You'll explain at the station," the second officer said, moving to stand behind him. Melanie walked in slowly, her heels clicking on the tiled floor with the finality of a gavel in court. She looked around the house, Jessica's house. The house Kenneth built a life in while pretending to be her husband. "This is how low you fell," she said, shaking her head. "Living like this while lying to everyone." Kenneth turned to her, arms slightly raised. "Melanie, please. You knew it was complicated." Melanie raised her hand sharply. "Don't. I warned you. I told you not to play me. But you thought I wouldn't find out." Jessica folded her arms. Melanie turned to her. "I'm sorry you had to go through all of this. I never knew about you until recently. I thought I was the only one he was lying to. Turns out, I was just another name in his list of casualties." Jessica nodded. "Now you understand why I couldn't stay silent." Melanie's voice softened. "You didn't just speak. You roared. Thank you for that." Kenneth dropped to his knees. "Please, please don't let them take me. Jessica, Melanie, anyone. Please, I'll do anything. Just don't let this go public." Jessica walked up to him and looked down at him coldly. "It's already public, Kenneth. But this is where it becomes permanent. You played with lives. And now, it's your turn to be played." The officers cuffed his wrists. "Let's go." He didn't resist. He couldn't. As they led him out of the house, neighbors peeked through windows. Some stood at their gates. A few even began whispering, pulling out their phones to record. In a matter of minutes, the perfect husband of the neighborhood was paraded like a criminal, because he was one. Jessica watched it all from the porch, her arms still folded, her eyes dry. No pity, no regret, just justice. Melanie remained beside her, silent for a moment. Then she said, "Do you want to come to the station with me?" Jessica shook her head. "No, I think I've done my part." Melanie nodded. "All right, I'll keep you updated." As the car drove away, Jessica stood alone, the evening sun casting long shadows across the compound. A cool breeze swept past, but for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel cold. She felt free. The days that followed moved quickly. News broke out. Social media buzzed. Kenneth's name was dragged through the mud. Radio stations picked it up. A few blogs requested interviews with Jessica. Others tracked down Melanie, who, surprisingly, agreed to speak out too. It became a national conversation. How far should a woman go for revenge? Who really suffers more in a broken home? Are Nigerian women becoming too bold? Or just finally fed up? Some people praised Jessica. Others criticized her. But no one ignored her. She had started something. And it wasn't just about her marriage anymore. It was about women who had been silenced for too long. About the lies they were forced to live with. And the courage it took to burn those lies to the ground. Jessica declined most interviews. She didn't need the spotlight anymore. Her focus had shifted. She began volunteering with a local women's advocacy group, speaking with victims of emotional abuse and helping them navigate legal options. She wasn't just healing. She was helping others heal too. But just as things were settling down, another letter arrived. This time, not by email or text. A handwritten one, delivered by courier. Jessica sat on her couch and opened the envelope. It read, "Dear Jessica, I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know the truth. Melanie wasn't the first person I married. She was the third. There's one more, and she's still out there. Her name is Vera, and she's looking for you." Asterisk. Jessica's hand tightened around the paper. She read it again. Third? There was another woman? Her phone buzzed. A message from Ada. "Jess, you need to see this. Check Instagram. Now." Jessica opened the app, heart pounding. At the top of her feed was a new post, from an account named @unravel. She clicked. There was one photo, a baby, and the caption, "His name is Caden. He's 6 months old. His father is Kenneth Williams. And I'm tired of hiding." Jessica dropped her phone. Everything spun. So this wasn't over. Not even close. Kenneth didn't just cheat. He didn't just lie. He had an entire hidden life. And now, that life was coming to knock at her door. Jessica stared at the screen, her mouth slightly open, her heart pounding like thunder in her chest. His name is Caden. He's 6 months old. His father is Kenneth Williams. And I'm tired of hiding. She reread the caption. Again and again. The baby in the photo had soft brown skin, chubby cheeks, and a head full of curly hair. He looked innocent, beautiful, and terribly, terribly out of place in the storm that was now her life. She clicked on the Instagram handle @unravel. The profile was bare. No other posts, no bio, just that single picture and name, Vera Williams. Jessica's head began to spin. She dropped the phone, stood up from the couch, and paced the living room like a caged animal. She whispered to herself, "Another woman? Another child? Another wife?" Her hands shook. She thought she had reached the peak of betrayal. But this was a whole new mountain of madness. The door suddenly burst open. Ada rushed in, breathless, holding her phone. "You saw it?" she asked. Jessica nodded slowly. "Yes." Ada flopped onto the couch. "What in God's name is going on? Vera? Baby? Another wife?" Jessica sat beside her, her voice low. "She used his surname, Williams." Ada gasped. "You think he married her too?" Jessica covered her face. "I don't know anymore, Ada. At this point, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a whole second Kenneth walking around somewhere." Ada's phone buzzed. She checked the screen. "It's her." Jessica looked up. "Who?" "The Vera girl. She just sent a DM. To both of us." Jessica grabbed her own phone. Sure enough, there it was. A new message. "Jessica. Ada. I know this is sudden, But I've been trying to reach you for weeks. Please, can we talk? In person. I'll explain everything. I swear, I didn't know he was married to anyone else. I didn't know about Melanie. Or Linda. Or you. Ada looked at Jessica. What do we do? Jessica stared at the screen. Then typed back. Where? The reply came almost instantly. Tomorrow. Noon. Gloria's Garden Lounge. GRA. I'll be waiting. The next day came too slowly for Jessica. Her mind was heavy. Her thoughts louder than her footsteps. Gloria's Garden Lounge was quiet, tucked in a leafy corner of GRA, a place known for privacy and good coffee. She walked in with Ada beside her. Both of them dressed simply but sharply, women on a mission. They found Vera already seated, wearing a plain white dress, her hair packed neatly in a bun. In front of her was a stroller. Inside it, the baby, Caden, slept peacefully. Jessica stopped. She hadn't expected the baby to be there. Vera stood as they approached. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her face tired, but not weak. She looked at Jessica, then at Ada. I'm sorry, she said softly, for all of this. Jessica sat down without a word. Ada remained standing for a second longer, arms folded. Then she slowly took her seat. Jessica leaned forward. Start from the beginning. Vera nodded, wiping her palms on her lap. I met Kenneth 2 years ago, at a conference in Calabar. He said he was divorced, that his ex-wife, you, had left him because he couldn't give her a child. Jessica's hands curled into fists. He was charming, smart, polite, said he was starting fresh. He even showed me photos of a duplex he said he was building in Lekki. Said we could move in together when it was finished. Jessica almost laughed. A duplex? Kenneth had never even stepped foot in Lekki. Vera continued. I got pregnant. First he was shocked, then excited. Told me we should name him Caden. We did a small court registry ceremony, just us and 2 of his so-called cousins. No family, no friends. I thought he was just being private. Jessica's throat was dry. Do you have the marriage certificate? Vera nodded and pulled it from her bag. Jessica took it. It was real. Another legal marriage. Another crime. He started changing after the baby was born, Vera said, her voice cracking. Stopped calling. Stopped sending money. Then one day he just disappeared. Blocked my number. I waited. I searched. Until one night, someone sent me a link to your video on Facebook. Jessica froze. You saw the live stream? Ada asked. Vera nodded. Yes, and I almost fainted. That's when I realized. I'm not the only one. I'm just part of the damage. Jessica felt something break deep inside her. Not anger. Not sadness. Something worse. Emptiness. She looked at Vera. So you didn't know about me? Or Linda? Or Melanie? Vera shook her head. No. I swear on my child's life. I had no idea. Kenneth was a different man when he was with me. Now I wonder if he even knew who he was. They sat in silence for a moment. Caden stirred in the stroller, letting out a tiny yawn. Jessica looked at him and whispered, He's innocent. Vera nodded. He didn't ask for this life, but I'll do everything to protect him from it. Jessica leaned back in her chair. Well, then it's time we make Kenneth face all of it. Not just what he did to me, or to you, but to everyone. Vera looked up. You mean together? Jessica glanced at Ada. Ada nodded. A united front. Every woman he's hurt. Every lie he told. Let's bring it all out. Jessica's eyes hardened. Let's finish what I started. That evening, Jessica made a new post on Instagram. She tagged Vera. She tagged Melanie. She tagged Linda. The caption read, Sometimes monsters wear wedding rings, but justice doesn't care who you married. Part 2 of my story premieres live this Sunday. With 3 women and 1 truth. The internet exploded. People flooded the comments. She's back. 3 wives? This man is demonic. Part 2 go hot. By the next morning, news channels picked it up. Hashtag the Williams Files trended on Twitter. But while the world prepared to watch the second storm unfold, Jessica received a call that stopped her in her tracks. It was Barrister Uche. "Jessica," he said, his voice urgent. "You need to come to the station." "What happened?" "It's Kenneth." "What about him?" The line went quiet. Then the lawyer said, "He collapsed in custody. He's in the hospital. And he's refusing to wake up." Jessica's heart skipped a beat. "What?" "They think he may have taken something. Pills. Poison. We don't know yet. But it's serious." Jessica dropped her phone. The man she had just prepared to destroy was now fighting for his life. Jessica stood in front of the hospital like someone who had been dropped there by a hurricane. Her hands were cold, even though the Port Harcourt heat was thick around her like a heavy blanket. Cars passed. People moved. But for her, the world was frozen. She finally walked through the automatic doors of the hospital and made her way to the reception desk. "I'm here to see Kenneth Williams," she said. The nurse gave her a long look. Not rude, not curious, just knowing. "Room 307. She walked slowly. Each step felt like she was carrying 1,000 memories. Good ones, painful ones, lies. When she reached the door, she hesitated, then pushed it open. There he was, lying on the bed, silent, pale, unmoving. Machines beeped quietly beside him, monitoring life that was hanging on by a thread. Jessica stepped inside and sat in the chair beside him. She looked at him carefully, the same face that used to make her heart race, the same hands that held hers at the altar, the same lips that told her, "You're my forever." Now he looked like a man who had run out of hiding places. She whispered, "Why, Kenneth?" No answer, just the steady beep of the heart monitor. The door opened behind her. It was Barrister Uche. He walked in slowly, sat on the couch and sighed. "Doctors say he swallowed something while in the holding cell. They're still running tests. Might have been sleeping pills. Could have been more." Jessica didn't look at him. Is it an attempt to escape punishment? Or guilt? The lawyer said nothing. She looked at Kenneth again. "I wanted him to feel every bit of pain he gave me. But this? I didn't ask for this." Uche cleared his throat. "We can pause the case for now. At least until we know if he'll recover." Jessica shook her head. "No." The lawyer looked at her. "If he wakes up, he still has to face everything. And if he doesn't—" She paused. "Then let the truth bury him." By the next day, Kenneth was still unconscious. But the storm outside the hospital walls had grown. Jessica's upcoming live video had reached 1.2 million views before it even aired. People were waiting. Schools were discussing it. Market women were talking about it. Even churches were having quiet arguments about how a wife should protect her home versus a woman must protect her peace. But Jessica? She was preparing for war. Inside the hospital waiting room, she sat with Vera, Melanie, and Ada. Linda had sent a message from her clinic. She couldn't appear physically, but had recorded a voice note to be played during the stream. Barrister Uche stood at the window watching the sun set. Then he turned and said, "You ladies are aware that this could explode beyond just a social discussion?" Jessica nodded. "That's the plan." Melanie crossed her legs. "This isn't just about him anymore. It's about all the women who were told to shut up, who were told it was their fault." Vera added quietly, "And all the babies born into mess they didn't ask for." Jessica took a deep breath. "We start at 6 p.m. sharp." At exactly 6 p.m., Jessica's Instagram and Facebook went live. The video began with silence, then slow music, then Jessica's voice. "Good evening, Nigeria. This is not a story anymore. It's a movement." The screen cut to her sitting in a calm, white room. On either side of her sat Vera and Melanie. A screen behind them played a slideshow of images, wedding photos, baby scans, WhatsApp messages, screenshots. Jessica looked directly at the camera. "We've all heard of cheating husbands, of heartbreak, but what happens when it's deeper than that? When it's a pattern of lies, manipulation, and destruction?" She turned slightly. "This is Vera. She has a 6-month-old son. Kenneth's son." The screen showed a photo of Caden. "This is Melanie. She was legally married to Kenneth while I was still his wife. The screen flipped to their marriage certificate. Then Jessica leaned forward. And I am the woman who believed for 7 years that I had a faithful, loving husband. What I had instead was a stranger. Melanie spoke next. Calm, sharp. I married him in good faith. I never knew about Jessica. When I lost the pregnancy, he left me. Just like that. Vera added softly. He promised me forever, then vanished when I had the baby. I raised Caden alone, until someone sent me Jessica's video. That's how I learned I wasn't alone. Then came the voice note. Linda's voice crackled through the speaker. I know I'm the side chick in this story, but I didn't know I was one of many. I'm not proud, but I've learned, and I want my child to grow up knowing truth, not lies. Jessica ended the live video with a final sentence. For every woman who has been silenced, gaslight, cheated, lied to, and left to pick up the pieces, this is for you. May your silence end today. The live ended. 8.3 million views. Within an hour. And then, the internet shattered. Hashtag Dear Jessica. Hashtag The Williams Files. Hashtag Justice for Caden. Hashtag No More Silence. Women across the country, and even other parts of Africa, began sharing their stories. Celebrities reposted it. NGOs reached out. Legal teams offered help. It was no longer revenge. It was revolution. But then, just as Jessica began to feel the tiniest sense of peace, she got a phone call. Unknown number. She picked. Hello. A deep voice replied. Mrs. Williams. This is Dr. Alade from the University Hospital. Kenneth has woken up. He's conscious. But there's something you need to know. Jessica's chest tightened. What is it? The doctor paused. He's not asking for you. He's asking for a daughter. Jessica's eyes widened. What? He keeps repeating her name, Amara. Says she's in danger. That someone is coming for her. Do you know an Amara? Jessica whispered. No. The doctor sighed. Then you may want to come. He's insisting the girl is in trouble. And if he's telling the truth, you may not be done with this storm yet. Jessica stood slowly. A daughter? Kenneth has a daughter? And someone's coming for her? Jessica stood at the edge of Kenneth's hospital bed, her arms folded tightly across her chest. Her face was calm, but inside her, a volcano of confusion, suspicion, and exhaustion rumbled dangerously close to eruption. Kenneth looked up at her from the bed. He was pale, thinner, and far from the arrogant man who once paraded around with lies dripping off his tongue. His eyes were sunken, and his lips dry, but they moved with urgency. Amara, he whispered, barely audible. You have to find her. Jessica stared at him. Who is Amara? Kenneth coughed, wincing. He tried to sit up, but his body failed him. She's my daughter. Jessica's throat went dry. You have another child? Kenneth nodded weakly. Jessica took a step back. Where is she? His voice cracked. I don't know. Jessica blinked. You don't know where your daughter is? Kenneth's hands trembled. It was a long time ago. Before NYSC. I was in a relationship with a woman named Ngozi. She got pregnant, but her father was a retired army general. He hated me. When he found out, he forced her to move away. I never saw her again. I didn't even know if she had the baby. Jessica's heart pounded harder. And now? She asked. Kenneth's eyes filled with tears. 2 weeks ago, I got a message. An anonymous number. They sent a photo of a girl about 13. Her name is Amara. She looks like me. The message said, you abandoned her. Now you'll watch her disappear. Jessica's breath caught. What? I didn't know if it was a scam, but couldn't ignore it. I tried to trace the number. Nothing. And then, the videos went viral. My face was everywhere. I started getting death threats. And then another message came. Now she pays for your sins. Jessica sat down slowly. This wasn't a twist anymore. It was a curse. Kenneth's voice shook. Jess, I know I'm a monster. I know I don't deserve your help. But please find her. If not for me, then for her. She's innocent. Jessica's mind was racing. A 13-year-old girl. Out there. Possibly in danger. Because of him. She looked at Kenneth. You swear this is true? He nodded. Every word. Jessica stood. I'll find her. Kenneth's eyes widened. You will. But not for you, she said coldly. For her. By the next morning, Jessica had gathered her team. Ada, Melanie, Vera, and Barrister Uche. They sat around Jessica's dining table, which had now become their unofficial war room. Jessica laid out the message Kenneth received, the photo, and all the recent threats. She's just a girl, Jessica said, her voice tight, and we don't even know where to start. Vera leaned forward. What about tracing the number that sent the message? Jessica nodded. Already gave it to a tech contact in Lagos. He's working on it. Melanie tapped the photo gently. Ngozi? The mother. Missing, Jessica replied. No trace, no address, no recent activity online. It's like she vanished. Barrister Uche rubbed his temples. If this is real and this child is in danger, we need to treat this like a kidnapping case. Immediately, Jessica nodded. That's why I called someone else. Just then, the front door opened. In walked a tall, lean woman with short hair and sharp eyes. Ladies, she said, her voice clipped and confident. Jessica stood. This is Inspector Ifeoma, Serious Crimes Unit. I met her last year during a school workshop on child protection. Inspector Ifeoma nodded at the room. I've already looked at the evidence. We don't have much. But if what you're saying is true, this girl may be a target. And time is not our friend. She turned to Jessica. We need to do a public call. Put out a search with her photo. Alert the authorities in case she turns up at any hospital, school, or checkpoint. Jessica hesitated. But if we do that, whoever has her may panic. The inspector replied. Better panic than silence. Jessica nodded. Do it. That evening, Jessica posted the image of Amara to her platforms. The caption read, This is Amara. She's 13 years old. If you see her, contact the number below. If you're the one holding her, bring her back. She has nothing to do with your hatred. Let her live. The post went viral. Thousands of reposts. Thousands of eyes. And then, a breakthrough. At 2:36 a.m., Jessica's phone rang. It was the tech contact in Lagos. I traced the number, he said. It's a burner phone. But the last known ping came from Nsukka. Enugu? Jessica asked, sitting up in bed. Yes, a small town. The signal went dead 3 days ago. But that's our only lead. Jessica called Inspector Ifeoma immediately. By 6 a.m., Jessica and the inspector were on a flight to Enugu. Nsukka was quiet. Dusty roads. Loud generators. Friendly faces. Jessica couldn't imagine something dark happening in a place so peaceful. They met with local police. Showed the photo. Asked questions. And then, a shopkeeper recognized her. Yes, that girl. She came in with a woman, about a week ago. Bought snacks and drinks. She looked scared. I even asked her if she was okay. Jessica's heart leapt. Where did they go? Don't know. But they left in a gray car. Old Corolla. They checked CCTV footage from a nearby pharmacy. There it was. Amara. Pale, wide-eyed. Clutching a school bag. Next to a woman, dark-skinned, slim, wearing sunglasses and a headscarf. Jessica froze. She zoomed in on the woman. Wait! She looked familiar. Inspector Ifeoma narrowed her eyes. You recognize her? Jessica whispered. That's Ngozi, the girl's mother. By 10 p.m. that evening, the police traced a hideout in a remote part of Nsukka, an abandoned compound near the forest line. They moved quietly. Jessica waited in a patrol van, her heart pounding. Then the radio crackled. Target located. Moments later, a female officer approached the van, holding a small figure by the hand. A girl. Jessica rushed out, her legs shaky. Amara stood there, tired, dirty, scared, but alive. She looked up at Jessica. Are you my sister? Jessica knelt down, eyes full of tears. "No, I'm your father's wife." Amara's eyes glistened. "Is he a good man?" Jessica swallowed hard. "No, baby, he's not. But you are," Amara said. Jessica hugged her tightly. "I'll never let anyone hurt you again." Later that night, Ngozi was brought into custody. She didn't resist. Her eyes were cold, empty, like someone who had seen too much. "I didn't want to hurt her," she told Jessica. "I just wanted to protect her. From him. From the kind of man who ruins everything he touches." Jessica looked at her with sadness. "So you hid her, sent threats, made her a ghost." Ngozi looked down. "It was the only way I knew." Jessica stepped back. "Now she's safe. But what about the others who are still suffering in silence?" Ngozi had no answer. 2 months later, Kenneth was convicted on charges of bigamy, fraud, and emotional abuse. He was sentenced to 9 years in prison. The court ruled in favor of Jessica's divorce. She walked out of the courtroom that day holding Amara's hand. Melanie and Vera were in attendance. Linda sent flowers. Justice was not perfect. It was painful, messy, but it was done. 1 year later, Jessica started a foundation, Voices Reclaimed. It helped women and children escape toxic relationships, rebuild their lives, and speak their truths. Her first official campaign? Silence Ends With Me. She stood on stage, Amara beside her, Caden giggling in Vera's arms in the front row, and she said, "They said a woman's power ends in the kitchen. But I say, a woman's power begins the moment she stops swallowing pain in silence." And the crowd rose to their feet, not for a victim, but for a warrior, for Jessica Williams, the woman who turned betrayal into battle, and pain into power,